I met Elizabeth through a friend of mine about a year ago, and she said, "You have to know Elizabeth." I go, okay. So she has what I would call the ultimate seat at the table.
But what I did was I got myself a gig as an au pair in France. I ended up, fast forward, I was an au pair, and then I started my career with KPMG. They had a US tax practice in France. It was their only office outside of the United States, the US office outside the US. I started there, and we'll come back to, there's maybe a story there for you guys tonight we can talk about, and I moved on into different roles from tax into compensation and benefits. The bridge was pretty natural at the time, and then I got into other roles in HR, was brought back to the United States with the Coca-Cola Company to lead their compensation and benefits organization worldwide, globally, and then took an head of HR job in Minneapolis, Minnesota, for the Carlson Company, which is in travel and hospitality, and then I came here to run HR for the Bill and Melinda Gates, the investment part of their businesses. So there's a foundation, and then there's the rest of all the money is run by a guy over in Kirkland, and I was HR for them. Did that for a little while and have done some more entrepreneurial things in the last couple of years. And I do three things today. I sit on I chair compensation and nomination committees for two boards that are publicly traded, family controlled. My husband has a business, and I am his chief administrative officer, and so I do all things HR, finance, admin, and then I do leadership coaching and development and some governance work. So like to get onto a plane, half the time you have to get on a bus. And my daughter and I were going somewhere together. We were talking about something, and she said, "Well, do you think the bus driver could ever be the boss at the airport?" And I thought about it for a moment. Barry Dillard was on the board at the Coca-Cola Company at the time. And so I said, there's this guy that I know at work, his name's Barry. And Barry started in the mailroom. And so in the mailroom, it's not necessarily the same skills that the guy at the board has, but now he's at the board. She kind of looked at me and she said, "Well, what's the board do?" I thought, oh God, how do I say this? How do I explain this one to the 8-year-old? Right? Well, I said, well, there's the boss, but then the boss has some bosses, right? And so the board they're the boss for the boss. And they meet 4 or 5 times a year to help the boss run the business. And she said, well, do they get paid? And I said, yes, they do. And she goes, thought about it for a second. She goes, I want to be on the board. Right? She thought, that's a really good gig, 4 or 5 times a year, and you get paid. I want to be on the board. And I thought about it. I thought, well, yeah, me too, right? And so I was probably 30-something at the time and set myself a goal then. I said, well, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'll figure it out, but that's one of my goals. Nice. So it was from a conversation with my daughter.
Okay.
So,
I
true
like
story.
That.
Yep.
One question I have is, why do you think that companies with a higher representation of women on the board actually do outperform?
I don't have an answer,
okay.
So I'll go with a hypothesis. So my hypothesis on it is, I often try to say, okay, is that the cause or is that the effect, right? I think it's the effect of something else. Okay. And I think the deeper cause of it is that people who invite other people to sit at the table with them who are not the same are open to broader conversations about topics, are open to different ideas, are open to be challenged, somebody holding up the mirror and challenging their own idea. If you're part of a group and you're all similar, you take comfort in that and you get a groupthink kind of mentality, and I think that shows up in performance. Whatever your definition of different is, I think when you open yourself up to being vulnerable and allowing yourself to be surrounded by people who aren't like you and truly listen to them, I actually do think the result is better, and I think it shows up in performance. My hypothesis. Mm-hmm. But the number is not only true on boards, it's true on diverse management teams, it's true on diverse organizations. When you have diversity, you perform better. So I think it's as much as it's welcoming that and a state of mind that then allows a lot of other things to happen than it is just the gender diversity question.
So when we were talking about you coming to speak tonight, and I was explaining how Michaela and I have bonded together to elevate HR and elevate recruiting, one of the things that we talk about is that we don't want to be the order takers anymore. We don't want to be sitting out with our pen and our paper taking orders essentially from the hiring managers or the business leaders, but rather take a leadership position as HR and recruiting and really drive kind of a talent first mentality within the organizations that we serve. How does this idea of HR being order takers land with you?
And I think there's a piece of it that for a long time people said, and it's less and less the case, that I'm going into HR because I love people, right? I don't think that's a really good excuse and an answer, because basically, do you really think that the other people in the organization don't like people and that's why they're not in HR? Like, no, that's not true. The reason we're going into HR is because we can make an impact on the people that come into the business to lead the business and drive change and deliver performance. Or because we can design compensation packages or help to manage a huge investment in the business to drive results, right? So, and I think that's really changing. We're still dealing with that legacy. I love people, so I want to go into HR. So we're still dealing with that legacy. And then I think that there's a big chunk of our work that is transactional, right? It's operational in nature. If you think about compensation and benefits, it's probably the part of the business where you touch employees the most, probably more so in benefits and compensation, but you're at least touching people once a week or once every other week with their paycheck, right? Benefits, you're transacting with them all the time. So there's a very transactional nature, and that's how people interact with HR for the most part, because probably 80% of the time when we're touching people, it's through their paycheck or through their benefits plan, some way, one way or another. So there's a perception in terms of what the customer's receiving is these people are here for transactional purposes. So I think there's this legacy that we're dealing with. So it was interesting. So I think there were a couple of things that I did that helped our organization move from the order taker to kind of, we need to partner with these people. First thing I did was I did an assessment of the work that we were doing and did an assessment of what the work was that the organization needed. And there was a huge misalignment. I then looked at the talent that I had that was perfectly suited to do the work that we were doing, but not suited to do the work that we needed. So I went in and out of 14 reports that are either direct or indirect, I changed all but one, okay, in the first 18 months. And then the other thing I did was I went to see the controller in finance, and I said, look, we haven't been present, we haven't been doing our job in compensation and benefits for the last couple of years, but I'm here to tell you that's changed, and we want to partner with you. And the people on the team were like, I can't believe she just said that, we're going to get laughed out of the room. Well, luckily I had a highly intelligent woman sitting across from me, and she's like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a really good idea. So I did the assessment, I understood what the business need, I got the talent in to do the work, and I made a partnership with finance because I made them understand that we had people, as a matter of fact, the woman of the women that I hired in to do benefits is now the treasurer of the Coca-Cola company, right? So we hired in amazing talent and said, I need your help and I want the work. And we went in and did that. So I think when you're thinking about how to change to be from an order taker to a partner, really have to go back and look at the facts and get some data. And not say that I want this, and say this is what the business needs, and here's my part of the solution, right? So I think it's a different conversation, and changing that conversation is hard because they're not expecting to hear that conversation from HR all the time. Mm-hmm. So,
okay,
does that help?
It does help.
I have quite a few. As you get older, you get more pet peeves, and this is one of them. So, and I have to be careful because my daughter's sitting here, so I have to be careful how I say this. So I didn't go to Ivy League, which she does know, and I didn't graduate with a 4.0. So I won't say what I graduated with, but I didn't graduate with a 4.0. And I didn't take a traditional path. But some might say I'm doing okay, right? So, and I went out there, I did things that were very, very different and got very, very different perspectives, and then kind of continuously brought those perspectives and that network into my work, right? So it's as much about perspective as it is about network. And I think it's this constant, so first of all, I push very, very hard to ask recruiters and to say to them to think about their sourcing. Because if you're sourcing from schools that, have a 60% population of white males from upper middle class families, guess what kind of candidate you're going to get? You've got a 90% shot of getting white male candidates from middle class or upper middle class America. If you're saying, what skills do I need, and grit is really important, or perseverance is really important, or agility is really important, then why aren't you hiring people that had 2 jobs and graduated with a 3.0 and are managing some student debt right now? How's that for perseverance and debt, you know? I mean, so I think it's just asking, like kind of flipping it and saying, really, what are we looking for? Are we looking for people who can learn? Are we looking for people who are different? Are we looking for people, or are we looking for people that are the same? And it's okay to have people that are the same too. That's an okay answer. But are we asking the question? And are we really saying, you know, and another way to get around that is to kind of say, okay, that team over there is doing a great job. Why are they doing a better job than we are at diversity, at performance, at this? And when you start asking the questions, why, you're going to get great leadership and you're going to get a diverse talent base. So I think it's this kind of balance, right? So you got to do the work, and we got to, I mean, if people don't get paid, HR doesn't get to do anything else. So the operations work, and I don't like the word transaction, I like the word operation. That's really important. And when we do that really well, it's just like any other manager, we can move up the food chain, right? Because when the manager delivers on their operations, they move up the food chain too. Mm-hmm. So anyway, just kind of the balance there.
Well, what I love about that example is that you're introducing this idea of paradox. And I think the paradox that we have here for all of us is that, you know, we've probably all experienced how if you're the person that offers to do the project and you're the person that offers to clean up this mess, right? It might seem like you're just a slave to the company. And here we're talking about not being an order taker anymore.
Yeah, pick the promotable messes. Don't bring the coffee and the muffins. Pick the promotable messes. Mm-hmm. So, you know. Hi.
First of all, I really loved what you said about hiring people only from Ivy League schools. I recruit for tech, so that is something that I get pretty often. What I generally do is I just present the people anyway.
Great.
Because big question I have for you is I have a big pet peeve with mansplaining. I'm glad we have a name for it now. Mm-hmm. But sitting in a board meeting, saying something, and then hearing someone say the exact same thing as you.
Oh,
and everyone's
I have
like,
a great
Yay!
answer for that. I have a great answer for that. So when that happens, I look them straight in the eye and say, thank you for your support. Here's what I was thinking about when I said that earlier.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll be using that tomorrow.
It's good. You know what? Like when you get a good line, you got to share it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We know that women have to be likable and we have to be nice because we are supposed to have this touch of niceness, I don't know. So how do you deal with that when people and even other women are expecting from you that nice touch and you are so assertive and so confident? So how do you deal with that piece? And even when you are sending for example, an email and you don't have to say, hey, hello, so how are you doing and all that, like thing, and you just go to the point.
Yeah, so I'm pretty direct. I don't know if you guys figured that out. I've got a couple things that I kind of use or say and try to live by. So first of all, I care about people to tell the truth. I care enough about them to tell the truth, and it's a lot better to tell them the truth than to not say anything, right? They may not like it, but most of the time people know it. Second of all, I'm not in business to be nice. I'm in business as part of a team so that we win together. So sometimes that means that you can't be nice, and you just got to come to peace with it. And if you don't, that's okay too. But accept that either you come to peace with it or you don't, and don't beat yourself up for whatever decision you make, okay? And then I think the third thing is my daughter probably will kind of say also, but I always say, if you say no to yourself, you're not giving somebody else permission to say yes. So if you say, I can't do this, or I shouldn't do this that way, or whatever, you're not giving somebody else the permission to say, yes, you did that right. Or yes, you made the right decision, or yes, you can have that job. So you got to make the ask. But if you make the ask, you might get no for an answer, just know that. So I think part of it is credibility, part of it is trust, and part of it is being comfortable with your own style and not letting somebody else dictate your style, and just being direct. And it's hard. It takes years of practice. I'm over the hill, but it took me a long time to get here. right?
So my question is really around your expertise in compensation and benefits at a different rate, and then the pay equity, where quite often women are getting 70 to 80 cents on the dollar to a man. For everyone here in the room who's an HR professional, what's your advice to them to help close that gender pay gap?
So there are two things that I do. So I don't know that it's advice, but there are two things that I do. The first thing is I educate my daughter and any of her friends who want to talk to me about how to negotiate their salary. I was talking to one of the gals about, here's how you think about this, here's what you got to be able to do, here's the data that you need to have, here's the conversation you have to be prepared for. Teach them how to negotiate. Teach your daughter, teach your nieces, teach your sisters, teach them how to negotiate. It comes more naturally to men, perhaps, I don't know, or they're more comfortable with it, I don't know, but teach them to negotiate. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is HR professionals. I have always used my role in compensation and benefits at every level in the organization to make sure that people were paid fairly. I never told anybody that that's what I was doing, but I always did it. So I always had reports done, I always had I always looked for discrepancies. I always looked and said, this is a problem waiting to happen, we need to fix this. So as HR professionals, you don't even put the names on it. Just say, look at this discrepancy for this talent, this pool of talent. How are we going to deal with it? You don't have to put names on it, and you can deal with it. So there's I think, because sometimes people want to shy away from the gender question, some people want to shy away from the diversity, take the names off it and just show them the numbers. Here's the story. What do we do about this?
The first question is, have you gone through imposter syndrome yourself?
Nah.
And two, when you when you went through that, what are the strategies or tactics that you have explored that you found to be really successful that we can apply for ourselves as we go through that experience?
Okay. So how did I do that? How did I get over my imposter syndrome? Well, I married an amazing guy who happens to be a guy. And I asked him a lot of questions about how do guys think about this? How do you guys handle this? So I found a great advisor to kind of, when I was the only woman in the room, how are the other people in the room thinking about this? So I think it's really important to really deeply understand when they say meet people where they're at. I'll never be anything but a white female, but trying to put myself in other people's shoes and understanding how they're receiving what I'm saying has been super helpful in me getting over the imposter syndrome, because it's actually just kind of understand that you can learn it. And the other thing is figuring out that you're only as good as you allow yourself to be. So if you allow yourself to be great, then you're going to be great. So part of it is also us freeing ourselves up to be the people we're meant to be, and not putting our own barriers in our way. Others will do that for us. Let's not make it harder on ourselves. The thing is facts are our friends, right? So we really need to be focusing on the facts, right? And the corollary to that is anecdotes are not our friends. So there are a lot of stories about people and stories about business and stories about stuff. We shouldn't be party to those, and we shouldn't allow those to happen. So if somebody comes into your office and starts complaining, that's great, let them do that, but then say, and what did so-and-so say when you shared this with them? So the facts are our friends. I think that anecdotes are not, and my thing for everybody always is never waste a lunch. You should be out there networking, you should be meeting with people, HR should be a manager should go to HR and say, don't you know that person over in finance, or don't you know that person over in engineering? Can are they interested in this job? Wouldn't they be a great fit? You should be out there in your organizations and outside your organizations, meeting people, knowing the talent, not in the team that you serve, but to serve your team. So in the organization, so in your broader organization and outside too. Facts are our friends, anecdotes are enemies, and network.
Excellent.